The year is 1992. Lithuania had just regained its independence from the USSR. Everything looked up for the young nation, or so it seemed. In reality, the place was crawling with criminals of every caliber. Since the governments were really fresh and vulnerable, robberies, killings, bribes, and torment were commonplace in post-Soviet nations. However, none would shock Lithuania so much as the killer with the face of an innocent child. July of 1992. In the district of Šakiai, a local 70-year-old man living alone near the woods was found dead in his house. His body severely burned. He was said to be robbed and knocked out with an axe. Still alive, the man was set on fire to cover the tracks. 6 people were apprehended, but all of them had a strong alibi. The case was initially shrugged off in the police department, as at the time no hard evidence was found at the crime scene. A few weeks later, an 86-year-old man named Juozas was found barely conscious in his own barn. He had been brutally struck in the head with an axe. His house was also robbed. He died a week later in the hospital from the initial trauma caused by the robber. The police, however, didn't yet make a connection between the murders. Not long after the second murder, the belongings of the first victim were found at a house in the district of Telšiai. The killer, at the time only known by the name of Antoška, a short version of the name Antanas, apparently sold the items to the house owners. He was described to be around 30 years old, average height, light skin, bright blue eyes, with mixed Highland and some Egyptian dialect. Tattoos from hands to shoulders, presented himself only by the name Antanas. His behavior was said to be non-suspicious. Around town, he was known to be a nice, charming boy who helped people do odd jobs, but didn't have a permanent place to stay, and nobody knew where he had come from. 2 weeks later, in the district of Kelmė, an old lady was reported missing. Everyone knew she couldn't go away on her own, she could only walk around with a cane. Later, policemen searched her house, and what they saw couldn't be explained by words. Under a pile of straws was the body of an elderly woman, rotting. Experts stated the woman was brutally beaten with an axe around a week earlier. A bike, a bottle of perfume, a coffee grinding machine, a bar of soap, and a raincoat were stolen from the house. The press started going mad. Headlines started popping up about a crazy old man killer walking the streets of North Lithuania. It warned people to be cautious, but also spread misinformation, like the killer having slept on the body of the third victim for 2 days, which wasn't true, but it caused panic within the area. Later the same year, a man walking a forest road was attacked and struck 3 times with an axe. He managed to get up afterwards and, doused in his own blood, walked to the nearest house he could find. Fortunately, he lived to tell the tale. He said the attack was unprovoked and apparently for no reason. After 2 weeks, on December the 5th, news spread that shocked the whole nation. In the district of Raseiniai, 2 elderly women were murdered in the same house. A 92-year-old pensioner and her 68-year-old daughter-in-law were found with fractured skulls, trauma caused by an axe. One of them was found dead, the other died in the hospital. It was cited that the murderer found a bottle of champagne and stayed in the house for 2 days, drinking and sleeping in their beds. Right then, the police finally made a connection to the 2 previous murders, realizing that for the first time in independent Lithuanian history, they had a serial killer on the loose. Considering the evidence, the murderer's identity was clear as day. It was Antanas Varnelis. Antanas Varnelis had attended a school for the children with special needs. He was a disturbed person, born with a mental illness. Antanas grew up in an orphanage. He was described as always wanting to be the class leader, often turning to violence as entertainment, never attacking those who might pose a challenge. Antanas was said to not have any interests or hobbies, having his only talent be almost undetectable lying. The hunt for the maniac begins, read the newspapers. It was all over the radio and television. Lithuanian people were frightened. His face was all over media. The people of the country were urged to call the police if they saw anyone remotely similar to him. Police operational forces were spread all over the nation and told not to return to the capital without the killer. In a twist of irony, Antanas was caught by some elderly men in a village. Reportedly, he was looking for a drink and asked a local where he could get some, telling him that he had money. They went into a stranger's home, and midway through their drinking session, one of them saw his tattoo. Everything matched the description. They carefully got up, went outside, and called the youth of the village. Antanas was beaten up, and the police were called. The operational forces couldn't get him immediately, because they were getting calls every hour about a new sighting of Antanas. But when they did, it was clear, and they got their guy. The very next day, the newspaper showed photos of him behind bars. Being found sane and responsible by the court's psychiatric committee, he was sentenced to execution. Varnelis confessed to not only the murders, but also a rape of a 13-year-old and numerous robberies and petty crimes. And so Lithuania's first serial killer pled guilty and was executed by shooting. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and for now,
see you in hell.